microlearning, and I think before we get into transformative microlearning with AI, I think we should just start with basic definitions for those of you who may or may not be familiar with microlearning. There is so much research that's evolving and constantly evolving around why microlearning. I often like to say, for those of you who know me, microlearning is not new. Since the beginning of humanity and beginning of communication, we communicate in microlearning bites. And if you don't believe me, I challenge all of you to take every conversation you have and take a stopwatch and time how many seconds it takes between statements that each person makes in a conversation. It'll be about a minute or less than a minute. If it's more than 90 seconds, you'll feel the person is droning on. And even if the person is giving a monologue like I am, you'll notice that I pause after about a minute. And it's not something that I'm timing myself. It's just naturally the way that people communicate. Because we can only take in so many bytes of information. Of course, if you string it all together, it could be an hour conversation or an hour monologue, but it's broken up into 60 bytes. So the whole concept of microlearning is just a very human way of communicating. It helps to retain information. Otherwise, it's too much to take in. So we have to pause. That's my bite, right? And then I move on to my next bite. And so as we think about then the leveraging of microlearning with gamification now and social learning, which is also an adult learning principle, it's designed for modern learners who are on the go. So the wonderful news is now that microlearning has become the big thing is that we're finally aligning it more back to the basics of how humans actually communicate and prefer communication. So if you have complex information or lots of information, instead of throwing it at them, breaking it up into those bites to allow them to process it, engage with it, apply it, is going to then, of course, improve effectiveness and retention. So that's kind of why we're focusing on microlearning, because it's more human, it's the way humans prefer to communicate, and because it actually works for impact and effectiveness. Now, why AI? So we talk about AI, and everyone's talking about AI and how we are leveraging AI in many different ways. There's a lot of fear. Is AI going to replace me as the educator, as the instructional designer? Is it going to take my job as the trainer? How do we think about productivity? How do we think about content privacy? How do we think about data security? How do we think about accuracy? What is the role then of the human that we're all on this call thinking, then what is our role in this age of AI? So as we think about that, it's so important for us to then critically assess what can AI do versus what can it not do, at least at this stage, and that's evolving on a daily basis. So this will have to be updated. But how do we then also think about how do we develop ourselves, our capabilities and mindsets, given the trends of what AI is doing? And how do we then get ahead so that we're using AI as a tool to enhance and enable and empower, not to just replace? So there's definitely a critical role in the evolution of these roles. And so as we think about then AI as a productivity tool with then microlearning, which is a more human way of communicating, then that's where we can see the potential of transformative impact. And so this is just some research from a webinar we did recently. And it's pretty similar actually to what we saw in this room about how people rated themselves. And it was about the same as this group, that about half, 40 to half were somewhat familiar, but not so familiar, right? And so it's still a very, very new and emerging field. So we look forward to having more and more practitioners to then practice this. So let's just take a pause here to do a quick poll. AI, is it a friend or is it a foe? In session 2, let's take a moment to fill out the poll, and I'm curious to get a sense of what you all think. Okay, see what we got. Okay. We have any last minute voters? I think this is a biased group since we all attended this this masterclass. I think we're all probably a bit more open towards AI. And so maybe for our colleagues who didn't join this masterclass, this might be an opportunity after to share it with them and get them to just sometimes we fear what we don't know. So sometimes learning about it and spending time getting more familiar will lower that mental and emotional barrier to something new. Excellent. Okay, so over 60% of us think it's a huge win. So be curious to find out why you think that. But so we think about the benefits. There are definitely many benefits, perceived benefits to AI. Of course, productivity is a huge time saver. I mean, we're going from sometimes weeks, tasks that have taken days, weeks, even months that are now being done instantly in seconds. So, I mean, it's even hard to, is it 1,000-fold? Is it 10,000-fold faster? So you're seeing tremendous amounts of productivity improvements in terms of AI. It's also in terms of access to information. It's like Google search on steroids. Now with ChatGPT, you can get structured information much, much faster than we've done even in Google search. So it's like a leapfrog ahead of that. This great starting point. So some of you might be wondering, what does that mean? Sometimes as a content creator, you don't know where to start. You're like, I want to create this program on how to improve productivity, for example. Where do I start? What is do I start with an article? Do I start with a question? How do I start? So sometimes AI could be a really good thought starter to then help your brains and your juices to get going. So it could be a really great trigger and a catalyst for content creation. But obviously, as some of you already have mentioned, the perceived challenges around ethics and privacy. What happens to the data? Am I going to lose my job? How do I use this technology? So if everyone is using ChatGPT or some kind of OpenAI software, then what is my unique differentiator? Plagiarism. If you're in education, what if students, and we definitely are seeing this across the board, not just students, but students and employees, using these ChatGPT tools and literally like replicating even recommendation letters or resumes and all kinds of things now without actually giving it critical thinking. So you're starting to see that happen. So I'm curious for this group, what do you think? What are some of the major challenges that you're seeing or the major benefits? If it's a benefit, let's put a plus. If it's a challenge, put it as a minus. Take a moment to just jot that down and please share that to the group. And I'm just curious to just get a pulse of where everyone is in this group. I'm just going to move to session 2 here. Okay. Yep, Jason wants to see some proof and use cases. Yep. There's a Brian. Yep, absolutely. Definitely filling information gaps. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So I think that many of you are talking about the data itself, accuracy. Yep. And I think as we think about some of those things with accuracy, I don't even think that within some of these answers have been fully answered, even within the ecosystem. And I think a lot of the AI tools out there are trying to figure out how to do it. So you still need humans to be able to review the information. So what we're seeing is just a ton of information, just like Google search. And then you get a bunch of information, and then you still have to do some critical thinking, do some validation. There have been crazy stories out there with ChatGPT insisting that someone was dead when they were actually alive, and then they kept repeating itself because the limitation of the tools are that they're not designed to be wrong. So I think one of the risks of using these tools is that it will continue to iterate itself because it's not meant to be wrong, to prove that it's right. So that's where the role of the human is absolutely critical to cross-check, to reference. which then requires critical thinking skills. So as we start to talk about what AI can do and the role of the human, it's going to be how do we then develop those critical thinking skills for our creators, for our employees, that they're not blindly taking in information on fake news, but able to then process that fake news or that information to be able to assess, critically challenge what is true and what is not true. And we see some examples of that as you're going through, which is where your subject matter expert for the content you're creating still plays a very, very important role. But now the role of the content creator is evolving from just taking information, packaging it together into a learning experience. But then on top of that, thinking critically, is this right? Does this make sense? Is this logically consistent? Does it make sense with the subject matter expert? And then understanding, so the role is evolving. So the time spent not creating and doing the manual work, but of the thinking part. So I think it's actually quite an exciting crossroads for the content creator to now think more critically and have a more active role in the design of that learning experience versus just taking something from the subject matter expert and digitizing it. And so I think, in the last 20 years with e-learning, the instructional designers often didn't think about the content. They were taking the content from someone else and figuring out how to digitize it into an e-learning video, adding some questions to just test understanding. And, and we have they've done an amazing job with that. And now it requires another level because that part of can be automated with AI now. So as we think about what AI can do, there's just amazing things, and we'll share a few examples as well of what AI can do. Obviously, personalization is really important because now AI will be able to understand your data, your preferences, your styles, and be able to adapt and make different recommendations based on your personality, based on your preferences. You have adaptive learning paths. So this is where now AI can take your progress and performance and then curate a learning journey for you. It might even take your preferences and say, you like polls, you like games, you are someone who likes a lot of reflection, open-ended questions, then how do I adapt that learning path? So there are things that you can start to think about in terms of preferences. And now these is just early days, right, of the type of things that are possible. Automated content, we're very excited about this one. How can you automatically create the content and the experience? And not just the content, we should probably revise this. It's how do you automate the design of a learning experience that is based in instructional design, gamification, and behavior design? And maybe I can get Gregor to do a little demo for us as well on this masterclass, because we're so excited about the process of creating a very powerful experience that is grounded in adult learning research. And that's an automated content creation, which would be a huge time saver. NLP, of course, is big, natural language processing. How do you create interactive conversations so that it's not just a human responding to you, but chatbots, tutors, tools to guide you and to say, hey, do you need a tip? Hey, do you want to improve the wording of that question? Maybe it wasn't so clear. Here's a suggestion. What do you think of that suggestion? So really being that guide and that partner to then kind of go alongside with you. And of course, there's data analytics. So the data analytics side is the more and more data that we have on individual, on the team level, on the organizational level, that we're able to then assess, provide recommendations. This is, I noticed that your group's engagement has dropped lately. Do you want to trigger an email or a message to get them to be more engaged? Do you want to send a behavior nudge? And then using the data then to also drive greater engagement. We notice the assessment scores have dropped. Perhaps they need another reminder here. So how do we then use data analytics and AI to then enhance that experience? And then of course, there are pretty just basic tasks like I need to translate my program into 20 languages because I want to get it out to a global. And I don't want to spend tens of thousands of dollars and spend a few months getting that translated. And literally, these are true stories. Everything what I'm sharing right now are true stories of clients that will literally spend tens of thousands of dollars translating their content and doing that. Maybe I want to do that in minutes now, and then just get someone to quickly QC it. So there's all these opportunities now we can use with AI. And even in that example, you still need a local expert because as much, there have been billions of dollars invested in these tools, Google for Translate, et cetera, but you still need the human to be able to provide the context, to be able to do the proper translation, even after billions of dollars of investment, right? So this is where the limitations of technology and AI still exist today. And so as we talk about then what AI can't do, there's still quite a bit that it can't do, you know. And so while it can do the efficient parts of the tasks really well, it's still not the best at emotional understanding and understanding the interpersonal interactions or kind of the human side of things in terms of the softer side, empathy. It's getting better. It is definitely actually getting better. And we're seeing examples of it getting better, but it's still not quite there yet of getting the context right. And that's why, when creators are creating content, you need that context. Are these students coming into your class for the first time or professionals who've never experienced this content before and they're exposed for the first time? Or is this a group of people who are on the front line struggling and they had seen the content before and they need a friendly reminder, right? Is this a required course? So just thinking about the content very differently. We talked a little bit earlier, a few minutes ago, about critical thinking and creativity and how it still struggles, AI still struggles to understand, how do you know this content is real? Is it logically coherent? Are the three pieces of data that you just looked at logically coherent? So then the person who's doing the prompting is going to have to now develop the skills of being able to gather data from three different sources to then validate and check and not take the first thing that you take, right, as fact and truth. So that all of that is going to then require a new set of skills to be able to critically analyze the content. And that also requires a tremendous amount of creativity. So that creativity is going to come in the prompting, how you formulate the questions, how you get the data, and how you leverage the tools. That's always been the case, but I think it's actually it's going to be enhanced further with AI. Morality and ethics, this is probably one of my favorite topics. We can do a whole nother webinar just on this one. But there is, really, I think a lack of inherent sense of morality. It's zeros and ones, right? So whenever you're dealing with scenarios, and many of us are in the human space, right? Human scenarios and decision making, and we're trying to enhance judgment so that our teams and our people are making the better decisions that require judgment. And these are things where the development of the human consciousness is something that I don't think we will be outsourcing to AI anytime soon, but we'll be using the tools to then create those experiences for humans to continue to reflect, to then think. You can create scenarios, but how the people respond to that scenario will still be very much a skill and a mindset and a consciousness that I think humans will still differ, at least for now. You have then the adaptability, which I talked about, of how you can respond and change dynamically based on what's happening in real time. Midway, you can say, I'm going to make a change. The mood isn't quite right. People are not engaged. I thought this was going to be the right design. I need to change it up. How do I then change that up? So that kind of adaptability on the fly, on the go, is something that a human will do best because they can sense, and they can sense what's happening in the environment. And this is also where cultural sensitivity plays in, right? Being able to recognize that it's not just about zeros and ones or about facts and data. The way that we communicate in the US versus in Singapore versus in Poland. And the jokes that we make will be very, very different. And the humor will be very different. And how do we adapt that? And this one, I do think AI is going to get better at it. But a lot of the models, at least now, the data sets that are being used to train the models are still very limited and are not quite as culturally diverse and as rich. And so there's been a lot of criticism, I think, around these AI models because, the original models were designed by a certain demographic and a certain ethnographic and demographic base, which obviously creates problems when you think about the diversity, of the human experience, whether it's culture, whether it's, all the kinds of diversity. So I think that's the piece that's still a limitation. And then just building real human relationships, and being able to create that social connection is still very much a limitation within the AI space. So, as we think about how we leverage AI, just to summarize a few things we talked about, it's really how do we maximize that learner engagement in the things that are possible as we're adapting the content. And I'll just share maybe some stories, around some things that we're seeing. Is, for example, taking content and being able to really cut months of time and cost, reduce it through automated translation or through an AI assist that then takes the content, enhances the experience, makes it better, improves the quality so that the creator can then edit and tweak that better so that it'll land better and save just a tremendous. So it's being used. We're seeing a lot of efficiency plays right now with AI tools, and then when you get into the image generation category, a lot more creativity. So instead of being limited to Google Images, the ability to then automatically generate images that are much more contextual, a little bit more personalized. So we're starting to see some of that happening. And obviously kind of this automatic AI, the text, it helps to reduce the mental load of having to remember everything. I mean, we're using it on this call right now. We're using an AI companion to take notes and transcripts and all those things. So you're definitely seeing kind of the early stages. And I would say the first step seems to be much more the productivity and the efficiency, but there's a lot more to go as we move forward. So I'm just curious. I've been talking a lot in small 1 minute in small micro bites, but it's been a long time. So I'd love to invite all of you to participate. And I'm curious to take a moment if you could share one AI tip, trick, prompt, or tool that you're using. You're going to click on to session 2.8 and then just take a moment to just jot down here. So the way that this works is you just put here a comment and then you can post that. And this is Padlet. For those of you who know Padlet, we've just embedded that into Gnowbe. You can do it from your desktop or from your phone. So I'm just going to give everyone a moment here to just type in an AI tip, trick, prompt, or tool. So I'll add a tip, AI tip. Okay, let's see what you guys got. Oh, there's so many. Oh, I love this. Personas to help provide better results. Yep. That ChatGPT is great for generating quests. I love that. Wow, this is cool. This is my first time using Padlet for this, so this is awesome. It's my first time. I'm like, wow, Padlet embeds with Gnowbe really nicely. So I always love learning. It's super fun. Prompt the AI. Okay. And then give the request. Yeah, I love it. And I'm also just curious, as given the questions that we were asking around data privacy, if anyone has any tips around data privacy. That one I think is a bigger topic that has not been quite solved yet. I think it's going to become more and more. I will probably call on Gregor to share his perspectives on, on the future of that. So I'm giving Gregor kind of a heads up here. All right. So as we think about, how we want to stay relevant in the age of AI, and I do want to open it up to questions because I think part of the benefit of being together here is to ask questions and just have open discussions as well. But, as we think about the things that AI cannot replace, which is around human creativity, critical thinking, and really that being very, very human. What about you, for each of you? I'd like to give everyone a moment to reflect and share an example. How do you intend to future-proof yourself against the rise of AI as a replacement? But what are things that you are personally doing to develop yourself. Obviously, one is attending this masterclass and kind of getting into the conversations and dialogues about it is definitely something we're all doing. But are there other things that you're doing to future-proof yourself? And I'll share one as well. So I'll just give everyone a moment to share. Okay, let's see what the rest of this group is doing. Yeah, Melody, there's nothing better than just trying things out. Absolutely. Ooh, Angus, using the dark web. I'm curious on that, and VPN for Verizon. I haven't figured out how to use the dark web yet, so that's interesting. Yep, Brian, as AI becomes ubiquitous, they're using critical. Yeah, it is. It's kind of ironic, isn't it, Brian, that people are using AI, like they're thinking less by using AI, when in fact, the very thing you have to do more in order to use AI well is to develop the critical thinking skills. Right. So there's going to be, and I'm curious, on your thoughts too, but there's going to be, I think, a bifurcation, a further bifurcation. Those who use it to replace thinking skills are going to be left behind and the first to have their jobs eliminated. And then the ones who enhance their critical thinking skills to use AI better, then are going to be further differentiated in terms of being a valuable kind of employee, student, professional. So I think that ability, that challenge of using those critical thinking skills is then going to be the X factor. So that's super interesting. Absolutely. Thank you guys for sharing that. I think I always love doing these because I get to learn from others on this call as well. So just some of the things as we think about this, and and we're just really scratching the surface here, and there's so much more to be done. And so I don't claim that we're doing everything. There's so many things that are possible, but I just wanted to introduce a few kind of steps that we're taking into the AI space, because we are very also conscious around data privacy, around accuracy, around how do we really enhance the experience, but weighing the pros and cons and the risks associated as well, at least from a corporate perspective. So one of the things we did launch, which is an automatic translation. I don't know if you guys know, but we have users in 190 countries now, I think last count, which is essentially global. So we started with 70 languages, 70 of the most common languages to do automatic translation. The feedback we're getting is pretty powerful from local and native speakers, because we're trying to take the best language models for those languages and then put that in versus using the same one. And so now instead of spending thousands, you can instantly do it. All of these are details and links that you can actually just click on if you want to click on to find more information, about some of those things. So we launched that a few weeks ago. Very, very excited. The feedback has been fantastic. And the other piece we're investing in now, which is not yet launched, is co-pilots, Gnobots, and AI imaging, so that you'll be able to have an AI guide to then guide you, pilot you, and help improve the text, improve the way that you're thinking about things, the auto image generator. And the Gnowbot is really interesting. It's also going to be to help to co-create that program from scratch, to be that prompt to get you started on any topic. So that's something that's coming soon. Gregor, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, maybe a good timing to address one of the feedbacks at the beginning, hallucination, and how to address it here. I think the best way to tackle this topic is you need to know what question to ask or what to say to an AI to really get it out, the best out of it. Or the other way around, if you want it to lie or bring fake news, you will bring it to that point for sure. But what we can do, I think somebody mentioned it in the session, it's the use of personas, use of prompts that describe a certain area, together with tons of research we have done over the years. And collectively, we giving that all to the AI model. And based on these restrictions that we give it, so best practices of instructional design, how Gnowbe works, the different microlearning parts, and so on and so forth. And so we can make sure that it always stays within the boundaries of what we want it to be, and also aligns with the cultural values we want it to be. So there is personas that talk about the human characteristics of that it should have when doing subtle formulations or talking to a user, but on the other hand, also understanding the entire concept and best practices to make sure it doesn't suggest anything that is wrong or just not best practice. And I think we have nailed it quite thoroughly here to create a Gnowbot, which I'm really happy that we're gonna launch in a few weeks from now, together with the possibility to enhance text and of course create images to on the fly to make it really breeze experience to create new content in Gnowbe. Back
Thanks.
to you.
Thanks, Gregor. And so I think as we do this, we're going to constantly be looking at, the various use cases and how do we do that. But, as all of us, from learning know that it's one thing to have a masterclass on it. There's nothing better than getting hands-on practice. So I think one of you even shared, it's all about learn by doing. And so we're really excited that, we are enhancing our entire microlearning instructional design program. I'm sure many of you have gone through our MID 101 before, or maybe even 201. We're enhancing the entire program suite to embed AI and then the application of AI in all of our programs, launching in March. So MID 101 has been revamped, and then MID 201 is really the hands-on practice. It's not just the theory, but it's the accreditation program where you will get hands-on practice using some of the tools, leveraging it and applying it. We will also be there leveraging, of course, all of the adult learning science gamification from MID 101, but then learning prompt engineering for specific to microlearning, having you practice it. You'll then submit 3 programs, which can be your work products, and you'll get professional feedback and free consulting on those programs that you create. So at the end of the accreditation program, which usually takes about 2 to 3 months, you will have 3 ready to go programs that have been given expert feedback and consulting on. So we strongly recommend the hands-on practice, not just knowing about it, but doing it and getting feedback from a coach on your microlearning instructional design with AI skills. So in February, that's partially why we're doing this. We're running a promo of 70% off of our 201 program. So if you click here, you'll get the promo codes and everything. The next cohort will be kicking off globally. We'll have a US, Asia version. So globally, that will be kicking off on March 21st. So definitely sign up before then. The 70% will end in February, and then the price will go up in March. These are some of the dates. If you click on this, it will automatically trigger an email to your inbox, and then you'll get more details in your email as well. So we do encourage everyone to get that hands-on practice, because it's not just about learn by knowing, especially with AI, it's about learn by doing. And we want to give you an opportunity to practice and apply. And also learn from each other and build. And one of the things that's awesome about the MID2 community is it's really a community of practice. And the practitioners there are just awesome humans. And it's great to have them share with each other. And we love seeing what people are creating and doing in that community. So with that, I want to just pause here in session 3 and ask, what questions or comments, what did you learn, and what is still left? And I wanted to then also invite Gregor to share some perspectives on some of the other questions as well. And I'm going to go, and we're going to hear at the end of this, we're going to go back and add the recording so that you can share this program, of course, with your colleagues. But with that, I'm just going to go to the group board here and then open it up for questions. And while I do that, and while you're writing your questions, Gregor, curious around how you think about data privacy, which is a big question that came up.
Yeah, happy to answer. I think data privacy has not really changed anyhow before or after AI. It's just a topic that became more popular again, and a lot of people talk about it. But anytime you were sending data anywhere, an API, an app, translation service, you're always sending the data, and the question of data privacy and what these people do with this data is always present, and I think has been present since the dawn of the internet. So similar here, I think similar strategies. On the one hand, understand what an offer means. So sometimes you're getting a lot of tools for free, particularly AI tools, and then you end up understanding, okay, they give it to you for free because they need the data you put in order to put that as a sort of learning for their models. And other times you have services that you need to pay for, and they explicitly tell you they will not do it, where the question is, how much can you trust them? And the third thing is where you run your own model in your own cloud, where you have full control over it, and data is not being shared with any third party. And I think it depends on the what kind of data you want to generate or what kind of conversation you want to have. There are certainly very critical areas such as healthcare or something like that, or questions about law where there's really a lot of things you need to take care of and then make sure that it is not going into the wrong hands. When it's about content creation, because you're importing things like PowerPoints and PDF, of course, it also needs to be sure that that content is very safe. And of course, in Gnowbe, we will have solutions for any type of privacy wish. So generally speaking, we'll use AI services that will not track any data or use it for learning. That is an API where it's a third party that guarantees this in their contract, but those that really need extra privacy and want to make sure that even a third party is sort of having the data in their hand, even partially, can be offered their own learning instance, own model to be used. And on top of that, in the longer future, so probably by the end of the year or beginning of next year, we're also looking into offering that people come with their own models, particularly, if you happen to work at a larger organization, happen to have a big model that is really already having all the data in there, that is basically tailoring the needs you have in your organization, that we allow also usage of these models for extra privacy and safety. But long story short, I think the same measures has to be taken. So whatever was before in data privacy is the same now in data privacy, and should be taken care of as seriously, of course.
Thanks, Gregor. I think that's super helpful. I think I should also maybe mention that Gregor is one of the authors of kind of a lot of this open source information in Europe, and the European standards for data privacy are much more stringent than definitely the US and in Asia. So we're grateful to have Gregor's expertise, especially on this topic as we move forward. And I did unlock session 3, so I apologize for that. So hopefully you guys can get access to session 3. I don't know if you saw what I did on my screen, but I just unlocked it. For those of you talk about instant adaptation, AI can't do it, but a human can. So I just went here and I just unlocked it. So there you go. Now it's unlocked and it should be ready to go for everyone. Sorry for that. I forgot to do that. Other questions? Megan, were there other questions in the chat group? I'm just going to check here that we wanted to cover.
I think there was one question about how to handle bias.
Yes.
So it goes a bit into the direction of hallucination in terms of area, I would say. The short answer is you cannot fully control bias, or that it is not bias in a certain aspect. So because it is learning based on human data, and human data often has bias in there, that's what the AI model will also do, because they only try to replicate to the best of their knowledge. So meaning highest amount of statistic probability, what is the answer that satisfied the user the most, not what is the most truthful, anything like that. So I think in the end, again, critical thinking, is there a bias in there, or seeing basically asking questions about it. I think in the end, there are always situations where bias is being, how can I say, is being enforced almost. So there's a very interesting example. So for instance, when you do translations from one language into the others, certain translations don't have the gender in a job description. Other languages do have this. So if you translate it now in one language and then back in the other language, it wouldn't know whether this is a man or a woman. And what happens if you force it to still get the job done, that it takes statistic probability and say, oh, okay, a doctor, well, likely a man. Helping out in a kindergarten, likely a woman. Likely in terms of how often has these phrases come across when it learned from the data. And historically, of course, very often. So that's where we get forced bias from. I think we can prevent it by telling AI to say, I cannot do it, or I cannot tell you because I'm missing information, which is much better than just trying to come up with something that is in the end simply not true or not fully to the fact that we wanted it. Or if there are variations, so different bias, different opinions or perspectives, to really outline all of those, and then we can decide what makes the most sense for us and which kind of version of it we want to go for. It's not an simple and easy answer here, but I hope it satisfies the question.
Yeah, but I think it's a great point, Gregor, that you're talking about in terms of, in some ways, one of the promises of technology and AI, where we can be less biased in the data depending on how we prompt it properly to try to remove some of the biases, because that's where you don't have to put a name and a face and have the biases that naturally come in if you're prompting it to be more neutral, where it's a role, it's a person, it's a specific context, and then setting that context depending on how you trigger I think that scenario. So I think it'll be very interesting and a set of skills as we talk about D&I. Diversity is such a big topic, and inclusion, and how we are more intelligent in the use of AI to remove bias, I think will also be something that'll be very, very interesting. Yeah. I think one of the things, that I've been reading, I'm reading kind of some of your content here as well around some of the applications. We'll just share maybe a couple of examples of, what we're playing around with, which is pretty exciting, is really the name of the game, I believe, and be curious to get your thoughts. And, as we research this, it's not going to be about AI in and of itself. In some ways, open AI is the infrastructure, and we have had forms of AI for a long time. Robots, microwave, lots of technology are kind of AI. They automate tasks. I think what's becoming it's just becoming more and more intelligent. Now, when we think about kind of the application of AI, it's going to be how are we, it's the large language models. Who is able to build the best large language models that take the data source and applies intelligence to that data source in the best way possible to then get you to the desired outcome? So I think the name of the game is going to be then, so as content creators, as instructional designers, as educators, as trainers, is thinking, okay, what large language model are you using for your AI, or are you just merely spitting something out? So if you take, I'm just going to give, the example of traditional e-learning. E-learning didn't apply any instructional design to content. It just took content, put it onto a video, and then spit it out. During COVID, many people said, oh, we digitized our content. We're doing so great. What do? They took a bunch of long videos, long lectures in person, and they put a video camera in front of that lecturer. And there were literally 60-minute videos of people just talking at them. So there was no real innovation. While technology was used to deliver the content, there was no innovation or application of the instructional design methodology. And so similarly with AI, if we just make videos faster, if we just create content faster, but we're not applying instructional design and microlearning instructional design to that, it'll just be faster bites. And in its crudest form, Twitter is a bunch of microlearning, right? It's a bunch of, tweets are a bunch of microlearning bytes of information. Facebook is a bunch of microlearning bytes of information, right? So that combination of a bunch of tweets or a bunch of Facebook posts does not make a powerful learning experience. It requires the instructional designer to then still apply the science, the research, the methodology to that content. And so this is where the large language model that we've been investing in is not just to take content and digitize it, but to digitize it that in a way that applies instructional design methodology. So that is a really, I would say, big difference. So as you're thinking about the tools that you're using, because there'll be many, just having the consciousness about what large language model they're using to develop the output, I think would be a good critical question to explore as you're looking at all the various tools out there. Love your comments, everyone. I love that, Michelle. I learned that I have a lot to learn every day. That's a daily experience for me, Michelle. Yeah, Kathleen, this is super interesting. Interesting, just one other note on, the use of technology. And just as an example, on this call, we have people from, I don't know how many countries on this call right now. And some people, back in the day when we were all in person, but to get every one of us into a physical room, would be very, very costly. But in a room where everyone is speaking, it tends to favor a specific personality type, a more extroverted personality type who likes to talk, raise your hand and ask a lot of questions. But if you're introverted, you like to keep your camera off. Maybe even in a group, in an in-person experience, you might be the one sitting in the back waiting for, and just listening and observing. What we have found is even the use of technology, we get a lot more engagement from different personalities because it removes the need for that public speaking. So it's already being used in a much more inclusive way. So it's interesting to think about technology then to become a more humanizing tool than just being dehumanizing, which is what we often see. I love this, Angus, of course. I love it. Of how the importance of instructional design. So with that, I know we have a minute left. If there are any last minute questions, otherwise we want to thank you all for joining this masterclass. We hope that it was informative, and we do encourage everyone to continue the dialogue with us, whether in this group board or to start trying out some of the tools that are available. Would be happy to give you access to some of those tools, and especially with the upcoming accreditation 201 that's coming, that will be a lot of hands-on practice with our tools. So we do encourage you to sign up and to be part of this growing community of pioneering thought leaders, because it will evolve and it continues to evolve, and it's a pretty exciting time for us to be in right now. Any last minute words, Gregor?
No, very well said. Fantastic session, also for me, and yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and we look forward to learning from you and seeing what you're able to create using AI, but also the human critical thinking, creativity skills that each of you bring to the table. So thank you all so much.